it was Jesus spread, and then some of those who spread the rumor also heard that Jesus was seen alive thereafter. Some thought he had been resurrected, others disagreed, and the rest is history. So just a misunderstanding, totally plausible. None of John's nor Jesus's followers were present at this execution, so there was an ikhtilaf as to who was actually killed. Eventually, some of the leaders of the temple cult realized that Jesus may still be alive and had never died. They pursued him, but God caused them to ascend, thus thwarting their plans. And finally, this is the last slide. Let's revisit the four main criteria of modern historiography. I promised I'd come back to this. Question number one, is the crucifixion of Jesus multiply attested in historical sources? I would say no. Paul wrote that Jesus was crucified in multiple letters, but that is one source, Paul. Mark, who wrote the first gospel, was a Pauline Christian. He believed in Paul's gospel, that Jesus died for our sins as the divine Son of God. Mark depended on Paul. Matthew and Luke depended on Mark, and John had knowledge of the synoptics. That's all conceivably one source, Paul. And remember, Paul was not an eyewitness. In fact, none of the gospel writers were eyewitnesses. What about M and L? Well, it is plausible that M and L were created by Matthew and Luke themselves. So M is material that's only found in Matthew, and L is material only found in Luke. It's plausible that they created that material themselves. That was part of the genre of the flexible genre we were talking about earlier. It's common amongst the Greco-Roman novelists. And that's why they don't agree, because they made up these details. What about the unique crucifixion details of the Gospel of John? Well, as I stated earlier, John contradicts the synoptics regarding the passion narrative time and again. He's writing history through the lens of his high Christology. John is clearly inventing these details. Besides, John is Pauline at his core. Jesus must be crucified. What about Josephus? Well, the Testimonium Flavium is a fabrication. Thus, Josephus does not mention the crucifixion of Jesus. The earliest known Roman reference to the crucifixion is in the Annals of Tacitus, who died 120 of the Common Era. And there's actually some debate about its authenticity, but historians generally consider it authentic, genuine, and thus an important independent, i.e. non-Christian text that confirms the gospel accounts of Jesus' crucifixion. However, Tacitus wrote the Annals around 116, 85 years after the supposed crucifixion, and it's not clear whether Tacitus was relating what was generally known among previous Roman historians, or whether he was simply acquiescing to the popular Christian narrative. Okay, Tacitus did not have a reason to question whether Pilate may or may not have executed some random Jew among thousands of others. Question number two is the crucifixion in early sources? Well, it's mentioned by Paul, which is earlier than the Gospels, but Paul gives us zero narrative. However, it is not in Q, which was plausibly earlier than Paul. So no, the earliest source about Jesus that we know of does not mention Jesus' alleged crucifixion. It is not in Q. Remember, there's nothing in the gospel account, the gospel according to Q, about the crucifixion of Jesus. It also seems likely that from the subtext of Paul's epistles, that there were Christian factions in various cities around the Mediterranean that denied the crucifixion. And we looked at that. Question number three, was the crucifixion embarrassing? Well, this depends on the type of quote unquote Christian and what text he's looking at. So the answer is not necessarily. Again, the name Yeshua was so popular at this time because Jewish parents wanted their sons to be the Messiah mentioned in Daniel 9, who is martyred, and martyrdom is not embarrassing, it is glorious. Now, Paul was definitely an apocalypticist. You know, he thought the world was about to end. So there's a high probability that he considered Daniel 9 to be happening during his generation, as did many other Jews. And Daniel 9 speaks of a Messiah who is cut off. So I think what happened was that Paul heard rumors that a man named Jesus, who was claiming messiahship, was crucified, but that certain people also claimed to have seen Jesus thereafter. Paul said to himself, this man is perfect. He's named Jesus, the perfect name, short for Joshua, who claimed to be the Messiah, who was killed, just like Daniel 9 says, then seen after his death. So this is how God is going to inaugurate these end times, with Jesus' death as a martyr for our sins, then his resurrection. So for Paul, this Messiah in Daniel 9 must be the Messiah because the end is so near. So to answer the question, no, in Paul's understanding, insisting that Jesus did die as Messiah was not embarrassing at all. Finally, number 4, is the crucifixion socially or contextually coherent? In other words, does the crucifixion make sense in its context? Yes, a lot of Jews were crucified. That's the only one that modern historians get, in my opinion. But the problem here for the historians and Christians is that the specific events surrounding the alleged crucifixion of Jesus in the Gospels are highly implausible, which makes one question the historicity of the entire event. So in conclusion, after all of this, if someone doesn't admit that there is a reasonable doubt about the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth, if they don't admit that it is at least historically plausible that he wasn't crucified, then we must question their intellectual honesty. And that, my dear brother Paul, is mercifully the end.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ali Attai, for a magisterial exposition of the historical plausibility of an uncrucified Jesus of Nazareth. And I use the word magisterial very deliberately, authoritative, comprehensive, definitive exposition there. So thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there, and we can all digest the contents over time, I'm sure. So thank you. Until next time.
Assalamu alaikum.